All right, this is Algebra 9.5. We'll be solving quadratic equations, specifically using the quadratic formula. Remember, when you're solving quadratic equations, you're also finding the roots, you're finding the zeros, or you're finding the solutions to the quadratic equation. Okay, so a quadratic equation that we'll be solving will look like this. Ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And then we'll be using what's known as the quadratic formula. So no matter what you do, definitely write down the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula finds the solutions, finds the roots, or finds the zeros, also referred to as the x-intercepts of the quadratic equation. So the quadratic formula is as follows. X equals, because we're solving the quadratic equation, for x, the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So this is the quadratic formula. This is what we'll be using to solve every quadratic equation in 9.5. Again, make absolutely positively sure that you have that written down somewhere. All right, so I want to solve the quadratic equation. X squared minus 10x plus 16 is equal to 0, specifically using the quadratic formula. Before I use the quadratic formula, here's what I want to do. I want to list what a, b, and c are. We did that when we were graphing quadratic functions. Since this is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, then a for the quadratic equation is 1. That's really what's in front of x squared. B is negative 10, and then c is 16. Once we figure those out, we could use the quadratic formula. So now I'm going to plug the numbers directly into the quadratic formula. So the opposite of b, since b is negative 10, the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. Plus or minus, we'll talk about exactly what you do with the plus or minus in a minute. But b squared right here, the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 16, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. Okay, and then here's what we do. We simplify everything. After we figure out a, b, and c, you plug all those numbers directly into the quadratic formula. There's quite a bit involved in the quadratic formula. That's why I said write it down somewhere handy in your notes, and then you could just refer back to that when you're using the quadratic formula. Okay, now here's what we need to do. Evaluate everything underneath the square root first. We're still using our order of operations. So everything underneath the radical, x equals 10 plus or minus, and I'm going to write everything out here. Negative 10 squared is positive 100. And then negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 16 is negative 64. And then all over, I'm going to multiply 2 times 1, 2. Okay. We could subtract here, 100 minus 64. So 100 minus 64 underneath the square root still is 36, all over 2. Now here's what we can do. Simplify the radical. Luckily, this is a perfect square. The square root of 36 is exactly 6. So 10 plus or minus 6 over 2. Okay, now here's what we do. We basically have two separate statements written as one statement. I could break this up if I wanted to and then write it like this. 10 plus 6 divided by 2. And then the other solution, because there should be two solutions, is 10 minus 6 divided by 2. That's what the plus or minus means. Okay. You could write it out separately like this if you wanted to, or you can just do this. 10 plus 6 is 4 divided by 2. We'll simplify that, which is 2. That's one solution. The other is 10 minus 6, or you look here, 10 minus 6 is 4 divided by 2 is 2. Sorry, 10 plus 6, I did the minus 1 first. That should be 16 divided by 2, and that's 8. So we have our two solutions, 2 and 8. X is equal to 2, x is equal to 8 for our two solutions, specifically using the quadratic formula.